Well, hello there and welcome to the show. It's a Tuesday, and that means it's time to sit down with Eric Peters and to try to make sense of everything that's coming at us at 100 miles an hour. Eric, how are you today?
Oh, I'm great. I'm going down to the bank this morning to get a second mortgage so I can afford to feed my Trans Am.
I joke around. There was a lady standing at the cash register ahead of me in the grocery store, and something was ringing up wrong. And she's like, "I'm really sorry. I know this is taking time as the line's getting longer behind me." But she goes, "This is ringing up for $30 more than it's supposed to." And I'm like, "Hey, $30, that's a down payment on a tank of gas. Yeah, I wouldn't walk away from it either."
Yeah, and I have a feeling it's going to get worse. The latest news coming out of the Gulf this morning is that the shooting is resumed. And Trump, I feel, has painted himself and us into a corner on this thing. There really are no good options. And I think we're going to begin to see some of the really severe effects that are going to go way beyond just us having to spend this much more money to fuel up our vehicles. I just published an article earlier today about what I foresee is going to happen to the domestic car industry, in particular General Motors and Ford, and also Stellantis, which owns Ram and Jeep and Dodge. These companies are massively dependent for their profitability on big trucks and SUVs. That's what they make money selling. And unlike 2008, which was kind of the last time we faced a scenario like this, they don't have anything else in their inventory. They don't have cars anymore. They decided to go all in on trucks, SUVs, and crossovers. So there really aren't many low cost, high mileage alternatives in their inventory. So what's going to happen when people can no longer afford to buy, $60,000, $100,000 trucks and SUVs, and these things start to pile up on dealership lots? I think it's entirely possible that we're going to see another round of bankruptcies and potential bailouts. It's just, again, it's so gratuitously unnecessary. But just like back in '08, these effects occur because of these distortions in the marketplace that are largely caused by political interventions in the marketplace, and we all get to pay the cost for that.
Okay, so I'm going to take this opportunity to stump for those who haven't already become free market curious. This is a really good time to pick up a book, something simple. Henry Hazlitt, Economics in One Lesson, and study what free market economics really are. Because we hear talk when lip service to the free market. We do not have a free market today, but things would be so much better if we were, and just plainly because government interference is what causes those distortions, and it always ends up costing us more, regardless of the good intentions. And I think we've talked cash for clunkers many times, but we're still feeling the repercussions of a program from 2008.
Oh, and earlier than that, people often wonder, why is it that trucks and SUVs are so popular now? Well, the reason has to do with government distortions. Government effectively outregulated the large cars, passenger cars and wagons that Americans once typically drove as their family mobile, as the vehicle that was practical because you could put six people in it, and it had a big trunk and it had lots of room. Well, those vehicles don't exist any longer. The last vehicle that was like that was the Ford Crown Victoria, which Ford stopped making in 2011. So, it's been 15 years now since anything like that was available. And yet people's needs haven't changed. People still have families. They still need a big, roomy vehicle. And when the only option on the market is a huge SUV or, a quad cab pickup truck, well, they sign up for 6 years of $900 a month payments to get into something like that.
Yep, I won't say I've always been the most frugal person, but this is driving me more and more into the camp of, get something older, something you can work on yourself, something that isn't monitoring your eyes or, otherwise trying to, keep tabs on you. And, this, I think that's good. That's going to be where the real wealth is, not so much in, hey, what a nice ride you're driving, but, oh, wow, your car still runs or you're still free to go where you want to go without being surveilled, in the process.
Sure, it's no longer just the economics of it. There's a book, I think it's called the F-150 Millionaire or F-100 Millionaire, and it talks about how the smart people would drive an old truck, let's say, a paid off old truck, rather than throw money away at a depreciating asset, which is what a car is. It's not an asset if it depreciates, if it's guaranteed to lose money. It's hilarious that car dealers call them investments. Well, that's a pretty shoddy investment that you probably ought not to make. But now it's gone beyond just the money aspect of it. It's also the freedom aspect of it. I've been beating the drums lately about what's coming in just a few months from now in the 2027 model year, when, per the federal government's requirement, all new vehicles are going to have these, they call it a drowsy or impaired driver warning system, which effectively means you're going to have eye movement monitors in the car, in these cameras that are looking at you and making sure that you're looking where you're supposed to look according to what the government says you're supposed to be looking at. And if not, you'll be prodded and poked. And inevitably, I believe the next step of this is going to be that the intervention will come, meaning that the car will just slow down and stop or pull off to the side of the road, or perhaps you'll simply get narked on to your insurance company by the telematics. Oh, you were being a distracted driver. Your driving behavior is risky and unsafe, and so here's the 50% increase in your insurance. That's the kind of
Yeah.
thing that they've got in store for us.
And that insurance isn't getting cheaper either. Someone brought something to my attention the other day, and I think you've probably written about this before, but flock cameras
Yeah.
are quietly becoming the new normal. And there are very few people who are aware of them, let alone, raising, concern about, wait a minute, what are these cameras doing? And the crazy thing is, it's not the government that's installing them. It's a private company, but they share that information with the government, and it's being used as it's a dressed up form of surveillance of everyone. It reads license plates. It looks to see is your phone in your lap or in your hand. I mean, it basically it's doing the job of spying on us that government is forbidden from doing unless there's probable cause that it should be looking at us.
Yeah, and that's the devilishly clever aspect of it. They figured out that the government is to some extent stymied by the Constitution, what it's permitted by law to do. Well, private corporations, on the other hand, are not bound by the Constitution to the same extent. So they're able to do things the government can't do. And then, as you say, they can share. Don't you love the terminology? They can share things with the government. And also these quasi-governmental entities, which are what corporations are, in my opinion. Effectively, they the government is, and that they control us, they police us, they make us pay money. I mean, if you think about it, what's the insurance mafia? I call it the mafia because, it leverages the coercive power of the government to compel you to hand over money. And the amount of money that you're compelled to hand over is premised to some extent on the information that it collects via the government. So it's this incestuous thing that operates as a mechanism for completely controlling us. These flock cameras, yeah, nobody asked for them other than the people in the government and the corporations. And all of a sudden they're everywhere. And by the way, they're tied into the cameras that are in your own car, that the manufacturers install in the cars. They communicate with each other. They're creating this surveillance net, which will make it just like something out of a dystopian movie from the 90s, except it's real. Like wherever you happen to be outside, it's known. Your movements are being monitored, tracked. The facial recognition software knows it's you, not just some random person. And all that information is being put into a bank somewhere. And some people will say, "Oh, that's lovely. It'll prevent crime. It'll make our streets safer."
And
Well,
actually,
if you like that kind of safety, go into a maximum federal prison. There's lots of
right.
safety in the solitary cell in a maximum security prison.
I actually heard a candidate just a couple of weeks ago talk about how, well, I love these. I support our police. I believe, we give them the tools that they need to protect us and to keep us safe. And why this has helped stop human trafficking and it's helped solve crimes. And, the problem is it strains the guilty and the innocent through the same net. And it's just like the DUI checkpoints. There's no specific reason for this person to be pulled over, and there's no specific reason for this person's license plate to be monitored, but it's monitoring it anyway, just in case government wants to take an interest in that person. And there's a guy in Colorado. Maybe you've seen this story. The flock camera can't distinguish between a 0 and an O. And so he
Yep.
is continually being stopped because it flags him as someone who has an outstanding warrant. So he gets the hut treatment when he gets pulled over. And, oh, well, sorry, we found out it's the wrong guy. Well, that's small consolation when you've had guns pointed in your face and treated as if you're, some kind of fugitive.
Doesn't that raise an interesting question, though? They talk about how this is going to thwart crime, but what about government crime? That's a crime. This guy is innocent of anything. He hasn't done anything whatsoever, and yet he's got guns pointed at him. I consider
Yeah.
that to be criminal. This idea that the government somehow is immune from engaging in criminal behavior is it's a combination of infantile and delusional. What could government have done? I mean, what could an individual Hitler have done or a Stalin if he were just Hitler and Stalin? How many
Nothing.
people could he have rounded up and exterminated? Right? It's government that systematizes and institutionalizes that kind of criminality. So as bad as individual criminals may be, I'm not, soft pedaling it. I think it's a fallacy to say that, well, the alternative is we have some, individual criminals and the sainted government that never commits crimes. It's a fallacy. What you're doing is empowering mass scale centralized criminality with the idea that somehow you're going to get rid of these individual criminals. And you will get rid of some of them, but as the result is all of us are going to end up living in a prison.
Well, and I want to make clear, I'm not trying to say that this candidate is an evil guy who's planning on, I'm subjugating the population. He really believes this makes us safer, therefore it's a good thing. And I'm sorry, I don't want to sound like, because I've got all the answers here, but that illustrates to me the how widespread the ignorance is of what government is supposed to be doing versus what it actually is doing, what its proper role is versus what we've allowed it to become. And that illiteracy, for lack of a better word, is what is going to be our undoing, because the tyranny and totalitarianism and even just authoritarianism isn't coming in one big jolt. It's coming in on cat's feet, and these flock cameras are a good example of how it does it.
Yeah, it's superficial thinking. It's idealized thinking. It's this idea that you can have this perfect world in which the all benevolent government is going to solve all of our problems, and it's going to do it in a way that doesn't impact us negatively. Which, I mean, that's just childish. That's like a little toddler looking up to its parents, who, from the point of view of a toddler, they're these godlike beings who are in perfect knowledge and can do anything. They have miraculous powers. The government is just other people, and usually the other people are not really high end people to a great extent, and a lot of them, unfortunately, suffer from this control freakism, if you will, this malicious desire to direct other people. It's not even about, well, we want to minimize the harm, we want to increase the general good. There are a lot of people who are just busybodies, and they couch their malicious busybodyism in this, oh, we're just trying to help everybody shtick, which, if you look at it, it's self-evident what they're really all about.
Well, this is why I encourage people. It's not, hey, subscribe to my political philosophy or subscribe to, my political team. I'm telling people the best thing you can do is to decide to take ownership for your own life and realize that, first of all, truth isn't something that someone in authority is going to give you. You need to figure it out for yourself. But when you start doing that, the payoff is beyond anything that the government can offer you in terms of security, whether it be, real or imagined.
There's also an aspect of humility. Look at yourself and think to yourself, do I have all the answers? I'm having difficulty as it is trying to figure out what the right thing to do in my own life is. And once you sort of come to grips with that, you think, do I really have any basis for telling another person what's best for them? I don't even know these people. I don't know their circumstances. I don't know the totality of the information. How dare I, to channel Greta, to presume? And I think it's a really important thing. We should come at this with a degree of humbleness, and that we're all imperfect, and imperfect decisions are going to be made, but really bad decisions get made when they get made writ large and they get imposed. I can do some damage. If I make a mistake, I can cause harm for myself and maybe cause harm for other people because I did something dumb or ill-advised. But I can't do it on a mass scale. Only government can do it on a mass scale.
Yeah, and that whole idea that you just alluded to, the idea that somebody knows better than you do what is in your best interest. And that's not to say that, I have all the answers either, but I do know what's in my best interest. I know what's in my family's best
Sure.
interest. And I don't want to outsource that to someone else. I'm including in today's show notes an article from Dr. Gary Knoll. I think this was just on Lou Rockwell within the last couple of days. How to Live a Conscious Life. And this is a play off of something that I think it was Plato talked about. The unexamined life isn't one worth living. Maybe that was Socrates. I can't remember. I think it was Socrates. But um, the idea is you don't have to sit there and do navel gazing. It's not a matter of looking at the clouds and what is the meaning of life. It's just a matter of not letting the distractions, and I mean the screens primarily, take your focus off the things that actually matter in the long run. And
Well,
it's
sure. And
anyway.
how do we grow from children into adults? And how do we mature and acquire some degree of wisdom? Isn't it by trial and error? And isn't it by learning for ourselves what works and doesn't work? And the flip side of that is, if that agency is taken away from you, and you're essentially reduced to the status of a toddler who is told by another person or an authority figure, well, this is what you do. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to learn lessons on your own. You just sort of passively do what you're told. That's stunting of humanity. That's a diminishment of us ultimately. And I hope that people begin to see that and chafe against it, because we're here, our one of our purposes, as far as I'm concerned, my purpose is to figure things out to the extent that I can, to try to understand what I can. And I don't want anybody else, taking that option of figuring things out away from me. Again, Hugh and Greta, how dare they?
Yes. And there's an aspect here too, and this is a trap I fall into regularly, but sometimes we need to allow ourselves to be bored. And by that I mean, don't when there's a lull in conversation, or you've got some time on your hands, you're at the tire shop, your tires are getting rotated or whatever, don't automatically default to, well, here's my screen, let me start, doom scrolling on X or whatever. Have some time to be bored, in the sense that you're not just filling that time with that little rectangle in your hand, but look at the world around you. Have a sense of wonder at what's going on. I mean, this may sound childish, but are you paying attention? What's going on weather-wise? What is happening with traffic? How are people responding to one another? These are things that we tend to blot out because I'm bored, and it's easier to stare at that screen than it is to pay attention to the world around me. But when we do that, we notice things that improve our lives. We also are more creative by virtue of, we're not just filling empty space with mindless drivel.
External reality versus confected reality. I'm grateful that I grew up at a time when, if I was bored when I was 10, my parents would say, well, go outside and find something to do. And if you don't, we'll find something for you to do, right? As in, here's a chore for you to do.
Yep.
So we found ways to occupy ourselves, and it was a wonderful time. I remember going out, getting on my bike, and just exploring the real world. And it saddens me to see kids that age, they just, as you say, gaping at a screen, looking at something artificial. And it's even more appalling to me when I see the virtual reality stuff, and you see somebody in a cubicle somewhere there, and they're doing this like they're skiing, or they're, and it's sad, because I guess they don't know any better. We probably would have fallen into the same thing if we had grown up today in the world that is, but we had little choice, because the world was there. Go out and check it out, see it, do something. We didn't have the option to just stare at a screen all day.
Something that I find really helpful is to have some accountability. So it could be a workout partner. In my case, I have a buddy, Dave, and he and we love to spend some time exploring the Snake River Canyon. And sometimes it's just, a short hike along the edge of the canyon, but we go and we talk and we philosophize as we walk, and we see wildlife and we take photographs, but we're out there enjoying what is before us. And it turns out we really live in a beautiful place. And yeah, we talk about the problems of the world, but you know what? It all seems manageable when you're not just staring at a screen, and it's, the doom scrolling is kind of putting you under that spell.
Oh, absolutely. I went on a good long hike last Monday and just thoroughly enjoyed myself for a few hours, being out there in the woods by myself, seeing nature, the trees, everything. I don't want to sound like a crunchy guy, but it was wonderful. And I'm planning on doing an overnight backpack trip on the Appalachian Trail for the same reason, just to disconnect and be grounded, literally, as well as otherwise, just out there in a world that's not this world that we're dragged into, this confected artificial world.
And speaking of confected, a lot, so many of the squabbles and the struggles and the conflicts and that, I'm still convinced that much of what happens in Washington, D.C. is nothing more than a great big melodrama writ large, and promoted as if it is the most important thing in the whole world. There are important things happening there, but you know how many of them actually affect me in my day-to-day life? Hardly any,
Yep.
except to the degree that I let them. And,
Yep.
that doesn't mean I enjoy paying, high prices for gas, but I don't have a lot of say in the matter over that. I do have a lot of control, though, over, what I do with my time, where I put my focus, what is valuable to me. And I'm much happier when I'm less informed about what the president tweeted or he said about
Right.
this than when I'm actually out there connecting with other people and living life.
Yep. And they want us on edge. They want us angry. They want us scared, because those are very effective tools to keep people from thinking and grounding and focusing on the things that you just talked about, the things that are important. And it takes an act of will. I know it's difficult for me, and for you too, particularly in our business. But nonetheless, I've come to realize just how important it is to step away as often as possible and just decouple from it.
And you might even find that your sense of humor, is still there. I don't know what has happened in just a couple of generations, but remember when we used to be able to laugh at ourselves, and now, you can't post something, on social media. You can't, share a quip with a friend without, having to look around and make sure, is there somebody here,
Oh,
with
sure.
purple hair who's going to get offended if they
Yep.
see us smiling? Because it's
Yeah,
like,
that's why political correctness is so vile, because it puts everybody on eggshells. We're not allowed to talk about things anymore because, as you say, somebody might be offended. Well, grow up. I don't want to, sound too judgy about it, but those of us who grew up before all of this were told by our parents, sticks and stones. Remember that?
yep.
Words, whatever. So somebody says something, an adult isn't cratered because somebody else said something offensive. Maybe you don't like what that person had to say. Maybe you don't like them, but it doesn't ruin your day. So what? Deal with it.
And in a world where people live to be offended, I mean, they are perpetually offended, and they're doing it because it's a mechanism of control over others. Oh, my feelings have been hurt, everyone. Now you have to do what I say because
Yep.
I'm the victim here, and you're not. And it's just so tiresome. And I love to meet people who, whatever their circumstances, have kept a sense of humor, have the ability to continue moving onward, even if things aren't necessarily going in their favor at the moment, rather than just trying to shrug off all responsibility by virtue of, well, I'm a victim, I'm not
Sure.
responsible for anything.
Sure. And this nauseating tendency that some people have to put themselves on a moral pedestal. I'm better than you because I don't use those bad words. Ooh, you owe me up an apology because you said something. I mean, come on, just spare me. If you really want to be, a high priest of morality, go, join an order of some kind. For the rest of us, come on, let's just deal with each other like we used to deal with each other.
No, I'm with you there. It's almost like there's this undercurrent, this subset growing in our society that cannot stand to see other people be happy. And
Yes.
I know that's generalizing, but it's like not only are they miserable, but boy, I want everybody else should be miserable because I'm not happy either.
100%. I completely agree with that. Absolutely. At the core, these people are killjoys. They're chronically upset with everything and everyone, and they want you to be chronically upset too. They want you to share the rage, instead of just focusing on all the good things that we have in common, and individually.
And I'm not suggesting that, therefore it's my job to make their life even more miserable. I'm just suggesting you don't have to play along. You don't have to be drafted into their fantasy to, to make things right. You can live a decent, productive life, and you just have to learn to detach from, whatever buttons they're trying to push. It's like, I'm not
Yep.
playing.
Exactly right. Maybe go for a hike or drive a Trans Am or something like that.
Now we're talking.
Yep.
Something with a V8 I find is especially therapeutic.
Absolutely. And a four speed. That's the other critical element.
Oh man, great to talk with you as always, Eric. I seriously, I do. I feel better equipped to go and face the world each time we get together each week and talk. Thanks again for your time.
Oh, thank you, Brian. I always appreciate the talk.